all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. All right, good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. As always, thanks for being here. Yeah, that's about all I got. Yeah, it's I had a funny thought just now, and I'm trying to debate on whether or not I'm going to share it. But yeah, I will. Will you remind me to talk about why I hit the bell 3 times? Because I'll forget. And if you forget, then we both forget. Then we're done. No one will ever come back. So I had a funny thought separate from what I was going to talk about. I looked down as I sat down and I saw on my sock here the word Haynes. This is a little insight into what I get to deal with all day long in my head. And so I saw the word Haynes written on my sock and I was just like, okay, well, there's just another example of how we're all just given labels. Everything has a name. And we define our reality from that label. And the label doesn't even mean anything. It's just a word, right? So I saw Haynes, and then my mind immediately went to Michael Jordan, because I'm a big big sports fan, Chicago fan, Michael Jordan fan. He was a big Haynes person. And then it went to sports, and then I stopped because I realized I was sitting down and getting ready for class. And this thought about Haynes, even though it might seem, especially if you're brand new and you're like, I just showed up to Intro to Buddhism and this guy's talking about like socks, right? Which is pretty standard for me around here, so don't be surprised. But we're given a name when we're born. And entire lives, we build ourselves around that name. We come from a family. We build ourselves with our identity to the family. We come from an area we grew up in. We build ourselves around the identity of where we grew up in. Our parents, our brothers, or sisters. It's my brother's birthday today, so shout out to my brother. We'll sing to him later, don't worry. And our entire lives are structured around these labels that we are given or give ourselves, names. And then we feed so much meaning into that. Anyone have a story about themselves when they say to you, so tell me about yourself? How many times have you answered that question? A lot, right? And is the story usually similar? Oh, not even always. It's always the same story. And the scary part is we believe that story to be the truth of who we are. When in fact, what we're actually telling, usually in that moment, are just things that we think about ourselves, or things that we think other people think about ourselves. All our life is an entire lifetime of moment-to-moment experiences. That's it. This is the heart of the Buddhist teachings. It's going beyond these labels we give ourselves, these judgments we give ourselves, these critiques we give ourselves, these names. Going beyond the name and just abiding in each experience as it arises and dropping the story, dropping the label, dropping the name. And unfortunately, not always, but many people's story, of course, it depends on who you're telling it to, but very often the story we tell ourselves about to ourselves is not a great story. It's in pain, it's in misery, it's in sadness, it's in anger, it's in depression, it's in the heaviness of our lives. You know, when someone says, tell me about yourself, do you ever tell them, like, just, maybe you do, I don't know, like wild, incredible, great experiences you've had? Not so much. You know, why don't we do that? Why is that any less of who we are than the story we tell someone? If we're struggling with something in our lives and that you meet someone, they say, oh, you know, tell me about yourself. Oh, I'm really having a hard time. Nobody asked you if you were having a hard time. That's your experience in that moment. But in that moment, you make that who you are. And you just don't drop it. And you get stuck there. And then 40 years pass and you've been doing that forever. So if you're 20 and you're hearing this, don't do this for the next 40 years. If you're 60 and you're hearing this, God, I hope you do this for the next 40 years, because then you'll make it to 100. It's not easy to do. But kind of my challenge or practice for you all as you leave here today in a couple minutes is watch throughout today how many labels and names you kind of fall victim to, and how that really doesn't do much good in your life. And not only that, watch how many labels and judgments you drop onto other people. So we do it, you know, a lot to ourselves and a lot to others. And I'll leave you with this last thought. Do you have anyone in your life you've kind of labeled with a certain word? I don't want to hear the words. Could that ever change? Or have you just been using that same word about that person for 30 years and you've closed the book and your heart and mind are done? Maybe see if you can change some of that. Not for their sake, but for yours. So with that fun stuff, we'll start with a meditation practice. To those who are joining virtually, welcome. Thanks for joining us. There's a chat box somewhere on your screen, so feel free to chime in, say hello. A couple things I'll tell you with meditation for those who might be sitting for the first time. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is it working? Is it not working? Are we doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos, and this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. You are in a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. If you're on a bench or chair, however you're seated, just trying to sit up straight. If you're used to sitting in a posture with like your legs crossed and your arms folded, try opening that up and changing your posture, just to kind of be more upright. You're not trying to stop your thoughts. You're not trying to think nothing. You're not trying to go blank. We're just going to sit and breathe. I'll say things periodically to wake you up or remind you that you're lost in thought. I'll guide us as we begin, and then we'll settle into silence. And starting with your eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. Start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, you'll settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Lost in thought? Return to breath. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgment from the practice. Just sitting. Breathing. learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, wanting nothing but to sit and breathe. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. Most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit, or the hands, or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us, or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with our own mind, and our own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in, where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. That's your entire life. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. And all we're working on is closing the gap where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. Meditation's not an escape. It's direct perception into the present moment and learning to be with life as it arises. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. Sitting, breathing, becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do. That's the practice. We spend so much of our lives angry about the way things are, angry about our past experiences, angry about the people in our lives, angry about what we don't have. It doesn't do you any good. This practice is learning to move through that, to see it for what it is, which is simply you expecting life to be different from how it is. That's why you're angry. You don't like the way something is. I heard not that long ago, which I thought was a really beautiful expression. Somebody said that if you don't like the way something is, and you can do something about it, then do something about it. If you don't like the way something is and you can't do anything about it, then you can't do anything about it. Real simple. We have a hard time with that. We'd rather just sit and sulk and be angry and complain and blame, point fingers. Say it's all their fault. They did this. The Buddha taught very clearly we overcome anger with the practice of compassion, loving kindness towards ourselves first and foremost, and then towards others. Back to what I talked about at the beginning, that story you're telling yourself that's filled with anger and disappointment and resentment and hatred. Stop telling that story. It's not doing you any good. Sitting in your own pity is not fun. Feeling sorry for yourself is not a way to live. Find things in your life that you're excited about, that you enjoy, and do them. As all of us unenlightened folks, we see the heart of Buddhist teachings. They're pretty cut and dry. A lot of people don't like to think they are, but at least the translation of what he said to our modern day are pretty straightforward and concrete. And Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Paths, 6 Paramitas, 5 precepts, monks and nuns, 227 to 311 precepts. I mean, he was pretty straightforward about it. All of us unenlightened folks, we kind of mess with it a little bit and create a lot of gray areas and do our best to understand it anyways, and we twist it to make it okay for us, all that kind of stuff. And that's fine. And the reason I say that is that there's a teaching on the Eightfold Path of right livelihood. And again, he was pretty clear on things you should and should not do as a way of life. Don't be a butcher. Don't run gambling houses. Don't run brothels. I'm sure these are big concerns with a lot of people that are here this morning. All right. But for me, I look at right livelihood, and I also think about it as something that my kind of gray area of right livelihood is, how are you spending your day? And is it pleasant? And are you enjoying it? Because to have some job or some career or some way of being that seems on the surface to be this right livelihood way of being, but you're miserable, doesn't do you much good. Because if you're miserable, regardless of what your definition of livelihood is for a way to spend your day, if you're miserable, how are you going to be around everything else and everyone else? Miserable. So learn to enjoy what you do each day. And if you're so far buried into some career, some profession, some education, some schooling, whatever it is, and you're just stuck and there's no way you're pulling out anytime soon, then be with it and find time outside of that to do things you enjoy. Hobbies, fun stuff, watch more cartoons, whatever it is, whatever makes you smile, do those things. Yes, I take Zen practice and Buddhist practice very intensely and very seriously because, it's drastically altered my life for the last 20 years. But I also like to laugh a lot around the ignorance of myself and the world we live in. Even through all the pain and hatred and all those types of things that have lived in myself and in others around us, if I don't find ways to find humor in it and work through it to create change in myself and in the world around me, then I'm just going to sit here bitter and be angry and pissed off. And that creates no good for anyone. The world is a mess. Let's all do what we can to change it. But start with yourself first, before you start blaming everybody else. So, with that, I'll pause. I really just prefer to respond to questions. Meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with, and we'll use the rest of our time this morning for questions. And for those of you who are joining virtually, again, welcome. There's a chat box somewhere on your screen, so feel free to add some questions in there. I'll do my best to respond. You didn't worry about that for 20 minutes, did you?
Yeah.
You did. I knew you were the wrong one I should have picked on.
know.
Nothing else but the 3 bell question. Could have been a lot worse things you focused on.
It's true. It was meditative in
Yes.
its own way.
Thank you, Kathy. So, so somebody asked a question at the end of last class virtually, and I didn't get a chance, so I saw it at the very end and didn't really respond to it. But the question about a very practical, why don't hit the bell 3 times? And, my initial response always is, I don't know. The master I had and the temple I came from, they hit the bell 3 times. And so when I started leading stuff years ago, I just hit the bell 3 times. It's kind of like my favorite story where there was this little filmmaker, and I saw this once. I could have actually imagined it. I don't even know if it's real anymore because I've never been able to find it again. But they were filming some little Zen practice place, and they were on retreat somewhere, living somewhere, and they were asking everybody, a bunch of questions. And they asked this one guy, like, why do you get up at 3:30 in the morning? And he looked at him with this big smile on his face. It's like, I have no idea. And I still think to this day, some of you probably heard me hear the story, but I think it's one of the most beautiful stories because he didn't know. And you know what else he didn't do? He didn't care. He just did it. And how many things in our lives do we just do without overthinking it and analyzing it? I'll probably get back to the 3 bells, but if I don't forget, remind me. So many things in our lives, we're just like, oh, should I do this? Should I not do this? We worry about it. We don't know if it's right. We don't know if it's wrong. We don't know what everybody else is going to think about it. What are we going to think about it? How am I going to have to live with myself? How are they? Just do things. Healthy things. Things that don't cause pain and harm to self and others. But when the guy said, I don't know, I thought it was beautiful. So hang on, Chuck. So the practice of the 3 bells, for me, ultimately is in many forms of Buddhist practice is about the triple gem. And so each offering, when you bow, for me personally as a practitioner, and I begin what I would consider a formal practice, you in Thich Nhat Hanh, Deer Park, kind of Plum Village tradition, they call it inviting the bell. But you hit the bell 3 times to represent the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And that's called the triple gem. So at the beginning, when I do my offerings and we join palms and we recite the triple gem, I hit it 3 times, once for each. You'll see it done a million different ways, depending upon what religious practice or culture or what Buddhist practice or culture, religious culture you're in. So it's done various ways. Also with certain chants, sutras, when you're reciting sutras, to us, they sound like just chanting or even singing, depending upon how you're hearing it. But it really is like them reciting sutras. A lot of times they'll hit the 3 bells to start, and then they'll play the bell and drum along with it as they chant. They're called Dharma instruments. So you'll hear various versions of it. Another way that I was taught, which I thought was really beautiful, is that every time you strike the bell, you're bringing awareness to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of all time and all space and all directions, and you're inviting them to be present. So I think that's kind of cool too. Out at the monastery, every time they would hit the bell, they would say all the fish would come up to the top of the water, which is kind of neat. So it varies, but yeah. So hopefully that's helpful. Thank you. Other questions? Yeah. Oh, great. Sorry, Chuck, go ahead.
It was interesting that you brought up the aspect of labels earlier. Because I was also thinking before I came in, Dharma Bum Temple. That's really a rather odd name for a temple.
Totally.
And I'm really curious of how that came about.
Oh, how we picked the name? Yeah, it's an odd name. Yeah, very simple. I mean, when we came together as, really ignorant young American kids who liked Buddhism and Bob Dylan, Jack Kerouac, and a lot of other unhealthy things, we thought, well, what are we going to call this place? And we came up with the Dharma Bums. And initially, for the first 2 years, it was called the Dharma Bum Center. And then after 2 years of running a place that really was not it was beautiful and it was cool and it was fun and everybody loved it, but but it was a terrible practice place, meaning those of us who resided there, we just kind of had the facade of being Buddhist. And we just opened doors and we said, let's talk about Buddhism and let's share Buddhism, but our personal lives had zero practice. And when there's a whole history on the Dharma Bum website where I talk about the history, and this is written years ago, but I call it a series of heavy causes and conditions. We had kind of a split in 2009, and from a very early group, a couple of us had started it, and we changed the name from Dharma Bum Center to Dharma Bum Temple. And the reason we changed the name to Temple was that we were not treating the space we were in. Again, this is 14 years ago, right? But still a very profound moment in the evolution and early history of Dharma Bums. We were not treating the space we were in like it was a temple. It was a sacred space. People were coming, I mean, it was much smaller, but it was a sacred space and people were coming with just as much pain and suffering and misery as they were then. And we did our honest, best job to care for that, but we weren't practicing it. And for example, if I went to a Buddhist temple, like where I started at, I wouldn't have behaved the way I was in that temple, the way I was behaving in our own space. So the choice of changing it to temple, it actually was 2008, sorry, not 2009. We started January 07 and the end of 2008. So about, a year and 8-9 months in was when we cut everything and changed it. And we chose the word temple, symbolic really initially at that time, simply as a reminder that, hey, this is a temple, even if just by name at that point in time. So let's treat it that way. And, 14 years later, 15 years later, it's still the Dharma Bum Temple.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Evolution of names.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, sorry.
During meditation, I'm curious, why is there so much focus on the body when I thought the point is a cessation from sensations?
What was the last part of the sentence? I heard you say, why is there so much focus on the body?
When I thought part of the point was the cessation from the sensation and the craving and the suffering and all that from the body.
Well, the cessation of craving, the root cause of our suffering, second noble truth, right? Cause of suffering is greed, anger, ignorance, craving, desire, right? And the practice is to free ourselves from the cessation of craving, desire, leading to suffering. Where does that come from, though? Not the body. From the mind, right? So to your question, your very specific question was, if I hear you correctly, please correct me if I'm wrong, is why is there so much focus on the body, right?
Yeah.
That was your question. Okay, but hold on. You just said, for example, focus on the breath. Is the breath the body?
I thought it came from the body.
I didn't ask where it came from. Is the breath the body?
I don't understand the question.
Or maybe you don't like it.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. The breath, in my understanding, my interpretation of looking at Buddhist teachings, is not the body. Two separate things. Physical form, body. The breath obviously comes from this body, right? My breath didn't come from your body, it came from my body, but the breath is not the body. So when I lead meditation, there are people who do lead meditations to focus on the body. I'm not my practice. Definitely not a fan of that. I'm a fan of using, as the Buddha taught in the sutra, when breathing in, taking a short breath, know you're breathing in. Observation of sensation of breath. When you're breathing out, if it's a long breath, know you're breathing out, taking a long breath. Awareness and cessation of breath. Now the question is why, right? You ever get sad? You ever get angry? You ever get depressed? And when you feel that way emotionally, your thoughts and mind is usually thinking about something that happened at what point in time? Past. Right? You got helpers, don't worry. Right? And when you get stressed, anxious, feared, or worried, your mind is usually thinking about something at what point in time? Future. So, if so much of our life is our mind feeling stress, anger, anxiety, sadness, depression. We have these emotions. Those emotions, those thoughts, then manifest into our body, right? I mean, stress kills us, literally. So the reality is, the training of the mind to be present is so we can stop thinking about past and future, which is where all the stress, anxiety, fear, worry, sadness, depression lives. Present moment is just sensation of breath, which often in kind of Buddhist circles you hear it as neutral. It's just the breath. Now I say just the breath as if it doesn't matter. It's also the most important thing in the world, because if you don't have your breath, you don't got to worry about meditation anymore, right? So the breath is the point of focus, but not the body. And it's not even to focus on the breath from a, does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
So it's not even to focus on the breath as like a judgment of, oh, there's my breath. I like my breath. I don't like my breath. It's just the awareness of it being there, sensation of breath. Maybe you feel it. Maybe you hear it. Maybe you feel it through your nose, however you're breathing. Just the awareness of breath. All meditation is ultimately is a training of the mind, and this is where most people in Western culture completely miss this. Because they're stressed out, they're anxious, they're pissed off, they want to meditate to calm down. I get it. But use meditation as a training of the mind to be present. If you focus on one thing, could be the breath, could be your knee, could be the candle, could be a shoe, could be an incense stick, a flower. If you focus on one thing, what are you not focused on?
The past and present.
Past and the future. So again, the Buddhist teachings is to use breath, but you could also use anything. But if you use your knee to focus on as an example, right? Breath in, breath out, I'm aware of my knee. Breath in, breath out, I'm aware of my knee. No problem with that. Breath in, breath out, there's my knee. Breath in, breath out, my knee hurts. Breath in, breath out, why does my knee hurt? Breath in, breath out, I'm sitting too long. Why am I sitting too long? Because I'm getting old. Right? And then we just start from one single thought of the knee, and we start creating a story in our head. Yeah? Just like seeing the word hangs. Does that make sense? Does that address your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Yeah.
Kind of going back to this question, I know it's not your practice, but why do other practices, like I was here last week and I mentioned Vipassana, focuses on this sensation. That I don't understand.
Yeah. So the Vipassana practice, which literally means insight, is a beautiful Buddhist practice in meditation. So even though, yes, my practice, and I'm just kind of repeating the first part of what you said, but just my practice being the Zen practice, awareness of sensation of breath, and that's it. As Dogen would say, to where the body and mind fall away. So those don't even exist anymore. You're just abiding in sensation of breath. Personal practice. Vipassana practice, insight, meditation, awareness of bodily sensations, and all that kind of stuff. Also a beautiful practice, also incredibly important, has never been beneficial for me personally, which is obviously why I don't do that practice. But there is a beauty to understanding and being aware of the physical body. Why? Because it's there. Often people afterwards will say, well, I finished meditation. They're like, yeah, my neck hurt from meditation. Last I checked, and there's a lot of different types of meditations out there, but last I checked, meditation doesn't cause neck pain. What typically happens is when people express physical pain after meditation is they actually just slowed their mind and body down long enough, and what pain is actually there, they're noticing. So I think noticing physical pain or pleasure, either way, it doesn't have to be pain or discomfort. You could, notice my knee feels really nice right now, right? I'm happy with my knee. Those things usually don't come up during meditation, but it could be either way, right? I think there's a deep importance in understanding the awareness of physical sensations without attaching to them. Because when we go through our day, at all ages, but especially as we get older, things hurt more than they did when we were 15, right? And as you continue to get older, they hurt more than you did when you were 25 or 45 or 65 or 85. The body's continuously, as the Buddha said, there's birth, aging, sickness, and death. So as our physical body continues to go through physical pain and experiences, right, chronic pain, to notice them is important, but to attach stories to them is dangerous. That's where we begin to, and I forget if I talked about this last Saturday or not, but the second arrow teaching, which is, right, so we have physical pain. A lot of people live with chronic pain. So be aware of the pain. But then when we have chronic pain, then we're angry when we have chronic pain. And then because we're angry, we get depressed. Then we went from having pain to being angry and depressed. Now because we have pain and we're angry and depressed, now we get sad. Now we have physical pain and we're angry and we're sad and we're depressed. All these mental stories around physical pain. Awareness of mind and body is important. So even though I kind of dismiss it, I don't devalue, is that even a word? Yeah, okay, cool. I don't devalue the appreciation of that practice. But I would definitely default to asking a Vipassana practitioner that question. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah? No, go ahead.
So earlier you were talking about like labels and definitions and all that. Isn't Buddhist like?
Totally. Yeah. The ultimate practice of Buddhism is to have Buddhism completely fall away. It would be really beautiful if there was no need for Buddhism at all. Or Buddhists. That would be beautiful. There's a wonderful teacher, I don't know if you ever come across or heard if you're into philosophy or anything like that, but Krishnamurti. Krishnamurti is brilliant. And he, in essence, talks and teaches a lot about all of that we create these constructs. And Buddhism as well as a construct that's been created. And within those constructs, we kind of lock ourselves into boxes. Now there is, I think for Buddhist practitioners, there's kind of that, the loophole of the emptiness teachings, which really says that even though we have this body of Buddhist teachings and this practice and these pretty concrete things that the Buddhists said, they're all impermanent, right? One of the most common, if not the most common Buddhist sutra recited around the world, especially in what's called Mahayana Buddhism, kind of Northern Asia, China, Japan, Korea Buddhism that really developed about 2,000 years ago, is called the Heart Sutra. And so Buddhist teachings, we say there's Four Noble Truths, right? Suffering, cause of suffering, ending of suffering, and the path, the Eightfold Path, right? That's just page 1, Buddhism 101, that's it. And the Heart Sutra says there is no suffering, there's no cause of suffering, there's no cessation of suffering, and there is no path whatsoever. There is no wisdom and no attainment. So absolutely. Buddhism will not save you. It will not fix you. It's just words. And the words fall away. The books fall away. The Buddhas fall away. It's a favorite Zen expression. If you see the Buddha, kill the Buddha. Asterisk, please don't do that. It's my fine print. So yeah. All just constructs. But here's the catch. If these constructs, I don't care if it's Buddhism, if it's, if you're Christian, Catholic, Muslim, Jewish, pagan, Mormon, lack thereof, lots of wonderful religious leaders for the last thousands of years. They all said, for the most part, beautiful things. If I lived my life every single day following the words of Jesus, I'd be a fully enlightened bodhisattva roaming around. But I don't. So, but yeah, definitely don't attach to any of the constructs of the teachings or the teachers. So, other questions? Yeah.
I recently read a book about a slave in the 1800s working in Barbados. And she had the notion that having a past was a luxury and having a future was a luxury because she only had the present, which was picking cotton in a field every day. So how do we in the modern world differentiate everything beautiful about our past and the potential of our futures without attaching the depression and anxiety?
Yeah. Beautiful question to drop on the 12 o'clock church bells. As soon as you started talking, I was like, this is not going to be a light, easy question. So let me just address, the heart of Buddhist teachings and slavery all at the same time in 60 seconds. Thank you very much. What's the name of the book, by the way?
River, Sing Me Home.
River, Send Me Home? Okay.
Sing Me Home.
Sing Me Home. Okay, thank you. Wow. So, I'm sitting here as a privileged white kid with every privilege in the book. And so first and foremost, anytime I address anything of that nature, I always start with that because it's my lens and it's only my lens, right? As a, white, straight, male, able-bodied, I've got every privilege there is. I'm Jewish, so we're chosen. I've got them all. And so, I always watch myself and catch myself and continue to practice this as I look at, these questions. I think at this moment, bringing it to the second part of your question, which is what I'm hearing you ask is, how do you do that? That's what I'm hearing from your question is like, here was this slave, this human that was held as a slave. And from what I'm hearing you say, having no knowledge of this book and this person, is talking about what they did to get through each day. And it reminds me of the Viktor Frankl, this book changed my life 25 years ago, Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl's book, he developed what's called logotherapy, and it's about how he survived Nazi Germany and living in the concentration camps, both just horrific, disgusting experiences. How did they survive? So what I'm hearing your question is, how do I do this? And the second part to that is, how do I also honor and appreciate beautiful things that have happened and beautiful things that could happen? Fair enough so far? Yeah. I think it's for each individual, as a practitioner for myself, I can look at my past and see incredibly wonderful, beautiful things that I've done. And that all fits in like a little bucket. And then I can look at my past and see like just redwood trees, a forest of all the miserable things I've done, all the harm I've caused, all the pain I've caused, all the everything, the destruction. I can see all of that. And I have learned to look at all of that and not have it impact me emotionally in this present moment. But it doesn't mean it didn't exist. I don't see all the good I've done and think, well, look at me, I've done good stuff. And I don't see all the bad I've done and think I'm just a terrible piece of shit. I see them as things that have happened in my past. I don't mean happened to me, I mean just experiences that have occurred. And going forward, same thing, right? My hope is to learn from the past. That's the cultivation of the practice, that all the harm and destruction and anger towards self and others that I've done, looking forward, I hope over the next, say, 10 years, even if I live that long, to not be 10 years from now saying, look at all the stupid things I did for the last 10 years. My hope is to have less redwood trees in the forest and have larger buckets. But I'm going to make poor choices going forward. I'm going to make unwise decisions going forward. Guarantee it. And I'm also going to make decisions that are wise and beautiful and beneficial. But I'm also not going to use either of those to define who I am. And I'm not going to allow, and this is when I look back at your question, right? To the person you're talking about, what was her name? Do you remember the name? No, it's okay. To the person's name, or Viktor Frankl, that those experiences are not who they are. Those are things happening in their life to them and around them. And they didn't allow those things that occurred to them to define them and destroy them. And if we can build from that place, this world can be beautiful. It's not easy. I probably didn't even answer how. I probably just, I think, deeply feel your question and just maybe ask or suggest that with this practice of loving kindness and compassion and forgiveness towards self and others, that's how you get there. Do you have anything you've done in your past that you just can't forgive yourself for? Anything happened to you in the past you can't forgive them? That's where your practice starts. Loving kindness and compassion towards self and others allows you to forgive yourself and others for the past. And when you can do that, you can look at the past and not hate yourself and not hate others. That's where it starts. Yeah. Tell me the name of the book again.
River Sing Me Home.
River Sing Me Home. All right. Thank you. So I'm going to close on that note. We'll join palms. That the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most. So a few quick announcements before you all head out. Thank you for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple 17 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not teachers, we're not masters, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. We have different practices and classes going on pretty much every night. A large recovery sangha, so anyone battling addiction, drugs, alcohol, whatever it may be, there's classes going on for that. Yeah, always something happening. Very pleased to be starting our second go around, just to put some whatever feelings into those who finished the first one, our Engaged Buddhist program. The second one starts today, so I'm excited for the crazy 20-something people that signed up for that. Boy, they're in for it. So looking forward to that. Buddha for You is down there if you need anything. We will have a crew. Anybody wants to stay and help garden, clean up outside, that'd be wonderful. We don't have a cleaning crew. We are it. The last thing, if you're all cool with it, my brother's birthday is today. And as I mentioned earlier, are you all okay singing him happy birthday? And are you okay if I do a quick little, just send him if you don't want to be on film, if you want to comb your hair or something, go right ahead. But, I just want to, oh, sorry, thank you. His name's Joel, whoever said that. Joel, yeah, thanks. Yeah, so we'll sing happy birthday to Joel. Go ahead. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Joel. Happy birthday to you. Thanks all. You're the best.